Welcome to British Focus, the channel where we bring you the latest political updates and uncover the stories shaping our nation. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to join our growing community of engaged viewers seeking insightful commentary on the issues that matter. Today, we dive into a fiery political clash that has left many stunned. Reform UK leader Richard Tice has launched a scathing attack on Labour leader Keir Starmer, accusing him of crafting a false narrative around the devastating Southport attacks. Speaking with unrestrained passion, Tice declared, "We've had enough of these failures," as he squarely blamed the government for mishandling the tragic events. His remarks followed Starmer's speech addressing the incident, which many saw as an attempt to mitigate the fallout. However, Tice was having none of it. Appearing on Sky News, he wasted no time in tearing into the opposition leader, accusing him of dodging accountability and attempting to shift the blame for the failings. Tice's impassioned critique resonated with many, as he demanded clarity and truth from those in power. His words highlighted the deep frustration of the public, who continue to seek answers about the tragedy. Stay tuned as we unpack the rest of this developing story.
The Prime Minister is continuing to deliberately mislead the British people to continue suiting his own narrative. And I'm afraid all of this nonsense that he couldn't say anything is simply untrue. And it's not true to say that the nature of terrorism has changed. In 2016, the murder of Joe Cox, Thomas Mayer was immediately declared an act of terrorism by one individual. 2017, the murder of Keith Palmer here in Westminster by Khalid Massoud, immediately declared an act of terror. August 18 car attack outside Westminster, immediately declared an act of terror by one individual. December 18, Mahdi Mohammed stabbing 3 people in Manchester Airport, an act of terror declared immediately by one individual. What's happened here is that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, as he admitted this morning, knew within hours what was going on. He will have known about the background of this individual. They've made the deliberate judgment to withhold information from the British people that they could have told the British people, because Axel Ruda-Cabana was not charged until the 1st of August. So we could have been told, we should have been told about the prevent and the failings, and it should have been declared a terror incident within 24 hours. That is why the British people were so angry and are still raging about this.
You say the phrase deliberately mislead. The question then is, from your perspective, if that is the case, and I'm sure Sir Keir would very much disagree with you, why?
Because I'm afraid I think it's to do with political correctness. They were nervous about the fact, about the background of this individual and the failings of institutions multiple times. Prevent, that we'd already been told after the London Bridge attacks, we'd already been told that Prevent was going to be reorganised and sorted out. We knew of its failings. Didn't happen. We hear that police, he'd been in touch with the police, he'd been in touch with court, youth justice service. Everybody was covering their backsides. They all had something to hide, and therefore it didn't suit them to disclose this information. This is a massive cover-up of massive proportions, and the British people need to understand the truth.
The Prime Minister said earlier that if the trial had collapsed because crucial details had been revealed by he or others whilst the case was being built, that Axel Ruda-Cabana could have walked free. That's his argument as to why.
That is misleading waffle and nonsense. The guy hadn't been charged, OK? So we know what the law of the land is, as does the Prime Minister, and I've just listed out a series of previous instances where the British people were told within 24 or 36 hours that it was a terror incident, often being told the background of the individual before they were charged. So I'm sorry, Prime Minister, but you are deliberately misleading the British people. You are creating a false narrative, and we're not going to tolerate it.
He says that laws need to be reviewed, reformed and changed.
They don't. The laws are there. They're absolutely fine, as has previously been set out, as I've just listed, 4 cases.
But if it is the case that the framework within which Prevent is working isn't broad enough to identify a child such as this who's obsessed with genocide, mass killings, school shootings.
How much more information do you need?
But is it not the case, as he's trying to make, that it does need reform to the Prevent protocol?
You're right, the country needs reform because we're sick and tired of this incompetence by multiple authorities across the establishment. We've just had enough of these multiple failures. We were told Prevent was going to be reformed and changed, and it wasn't. You know, root and branch reform of all of this stuff is required. It is totally unacceptable.
So do you welcome these new reviews, these new inquiries?
Look, well, it's interesting. I mean, let's have a public inquiry, because we need to know hour by hour who knew what, when, and why decisions were made to withhold information from the British public. Nigel Farage was quite right to say questions need to be asked. He was quite right to say that the truth was being withheld from us, and he was completely wrongly smeared and labelled as being responsible for the appalling riots that then took place. If we'd been told the truth, I don't think those riots would have taken place to anything like that degree. Therefore, the responsibility for those riots, arguably, rests with the people who deliberately withheld information from the British people.
Nigel Farage, you mentioned him there, he was criticised. It comes as no surprise to me to tell you that. You are well aware of it. Do you stand by the way that your criticisms were levelled, the phraseology, the language that was used during the time?
He's just been proven right. He's literally been proven right. That we said questions need to be asked and answered, and he said, is the truth being withheld? And it turns out the truth was being withheld. The Home Secretary and the Prime Minister knew exactly what was going on. Rudy Cabana had not been charged. We need to know when they discovered the contents of the monster's bedroom and why they made those decisions to say that it's a non-terror related incident. The day after, and then even months later, on the 29th of October, the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police inexplicably still said it's non-terror related.
Richard Tice, Reform MP, thank you for your time.
Now that you've seen the video, let's dive into the details of this explosive situation. Reform UK leader Richard Tice has made some staggering claims about the government's handling, or rather mishandling, of the Southport tragedy, and his words have sparked widespread debate. Tice alleges that both the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary were fully aware of the circumstances surrounding the horrifying attack carried out by Axel Ruda Cubana, where 3 young girls were brutally murdered during what should have been a joyful Taylor Swift dance class. Yet, according to Tice, this information was deliberately withheld from the British public. And here's the kicker: he believes this wasn't just an oversight. It was a calculated decision, rooted in political correctness and institutional self-preservation. Take a moment to let that sink in. If Tice's accusations are true, we're not just talking about a failure of leadership, we're talking about an intentional effort to keep the public in the dark. Why? Tice suggests it was because the government was too afraid to confront the difficult questions surrounding Cubana's background and the glaring systemic failures that allowed this tragedy to happen. This is no small claim. It cuts to the very heart of trust in our institutions. And honestly, it's hard not to feel outraged when you consider the implications. This tragedy should have been declared a terrorist incident within 24 hours, Tice argues, but instead, it was swept under the rug. Think about that. What does it say about our leaders when they prioritize optics over honesty, or when they're more concerned about protecting their political image than addressing the root causes of such horrific events? It's no wonder the British public is angry. People want answers, and more importantly, they want accountability. But let's not stop there, because Tice's critique doesn't end with this one incident. He also takes aim at Prevent, the government's program designed to tackle extremism. According to Tice, Prevent has been nothing short of a failure. Remember the London Bridge attacks? After that tragedy, we were promised reform, sweeping changes that would ensure such lapses would never happen again. And yet, here we are. Tice's words are scathing but hard to dismiss. Prevent is broken, and the government's repeated promises to fix it have amounted to nothing. What's particularly damning is Tice's assertion that the failings of Prevent played a direct role in the Southport tragedy. He highlights a pattern of bureaucratic inertia and finger-pointing, with institutions seemingly more interested in covering their backsides than actually addressing the problem. Cubana, according to Tice, had been on the radar of multiple agencies, the police, the Youth Justice Service, you name it. Yet none of them acted decisively. It's a chilling reminder of what happens when systems designed to protect us fail to do their job. So, where does that leave us? Tice is calling for a public inquiry to uncover exactly who knew what, when they knew it, and why decisions were made to withhold critical information. He's not wrong to demand this. The British people deserve transparency, especially when it comes to matters of public safety. But will such an inquiry actually lead to meaningful change, or will it just be another exercise in political theatre? That's the question we all need to be asking. And let's not ignore the bigger picture. Tice's criticisms go beyond prevent or even this one tragedy. They speak to a deeper issue within our political and institutional framework, a culture of complacency, secrecy, and, frankly, a lack of courage to tackle the hard truths. This isn't just about Southport, it's about a system that repeatedly fails to learn from its mistakes. How many more tragedies will it take before real change happens? Now, let's talk about the Prime Minister's response, because it's been less than convincing. Starmer has defended his actions by claiming that disclosing information about Cubana prematurely could have jeopardized the case against him. He argues that revealing certain details before charges were filed might have allowed Cubana to walk free. On the surface, this seems like a reasonable justification, but Tice isn't buying it, and, honestly, neither am I. Tice points out that in previous cases, think Westminster, Manchester Airport, London Bridge, the public was informed within hours, and these incidents were immediately classified as terrorism. Why was Southport treated differently? If anything, Starmer's argument raises more questions than it answers. And let's not forget the riots that followed. Tice believes that the government's decision to withhold information directly contributed to the unrest. Had the public been told the truth from the start, he argues, the anger and frustration that fueled those riots might have been mitigated. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? That the very authorities responsible for maintaining order may have inadvertently stoked the flames of chaos through their own secrecy. But what do you think? Do you agree with Tice's assessment that the government's actions, or lack thereof, amount to a deliberate cover-up? Or do you think there's some merit to Starmer's cautious approach? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. After all, this isn't just a political issue. It's a question of trust, transparency, and accountability. As we wrap up, it's clear that this story is far from over. Tice's accusations have shone a spotlight on some uncomfortable truths about our institutions, and they've raised important questions about how we handle extremism, public safety, and government accountability. Whether or not you agree with his approach, one thing is certain: the status quo isn't working. It's time for a serious conversation about how we rebuild trust in our leaders and fix the systems that are supposed to protect us. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with us. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth commentary and analysis. Together, we can keep the pressure on our leaders and push for the change we so desperately need. In other news, a heated debate is brewing over Rachel Reeves' ambitious plans to expand London's airports, including the highly contentious proposal for a third runway at Heathrow. On paper, these developments aim to stimulate economic growth, but as with so many grand political initiatives, the reality is far more complicated. While Reeves frames these projects as a cornerstone of her strategy to revitalise the UK economy, critics from all sides are questioning whether the environmental and social costs are simply too high to justify. Let's start with the numbers. The Heathrow expansion alone carries a staggering price tag of £14 billion and promises to increase capacity by 260,000 flights annually. For proponents, this is a no-brainer, a massive boost to jobs, tourism, and trade. Yet, as we peel back the layers, the cracks in this argument become all too apparent. For one, the UK is already grappling with rising carbon emissions, and aviation remains one of the most significant contributors. Expanding airport capacity could make it nearly impossible to meet the country's carbon reduction targets, a concern raised by environmental groups and government insiders alike. And it's not just activists waving red flags. Key figures in Reeves' own Labour Party have voiced strong opposition to these plans. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, for instance, has been outspoken in his criticism, citing concerns over air quality, noise pollution, and London's ability to meet its ambitious net zero targets by 2030. Then there's Ed Miliband, the Shadow Secretary of State for Climate and Net Zero, who is reportedly deeply concerned that these expansions would undermine the UK's carbon budgets. If Reeves hoped for unanimous party support, she's clearly miscalculated. But here's the question that's on everyone's mind. Is this really the right time for such a dramatic push for airport expansion? The UK economy is indeed in a precarious state, with growth projected at a modest 1.6% this year. Rising borrowing costs and a weakening pound have left the government scrambling for ways to stimulate economic activity. Reeves argues that these airport projects are a necessary gamble to inject life into a stagnant economy. Yet, one can't help but wonder if she's missing the bigger picture. How sustainable is this growth if it comes at the expense of the environment and public health? Let's not forget the human cost either. The communities near Heathrow and other airports would bear the brunt of these expansions. More noise, more air pollution, and potentially more health risks. These are real, tangible consequences that can't simply be waved away in the name of progress. How would you feel if your home was suddenly under a flight path, with jets roaring overhead at all hours of the day? It's a tough pill to swallow, especially when the supposed economic benefits often feel abstract or distant to those on the ground. What's particularly striking is the lack of a cohesive long-term strategy. Expanding airports might boost short-term GDP figures, but what happens 10, 20 years down the line? With climate change accelerating and international pressure mounting to curb emissions, the UK risks locking itself into infrastructure that could quickly become obsolete or, worse, actively harmful to its global standing. Surely, the smarter move would be to invest in greener, more sustainable industries that can provide both economic and environmental benefits. Now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Reeves Airport expansion plans are a bold move to jumpstart the economy, or do you see them as a reckless gamble with devastating long-term consequences? Are you concerned about the environmental impact, or do you believe the economic benefits outweigh the costs? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters in these debates. As we continue to watch this story unfold, one thing is clear: the tension between economic growth and environmental responsibility isn't going away anytime soon. If anything, it's only going to intensify as the UK and the world grapple with the twin crises of economic uncertainty and climate change. Whether Reeves' plans succeed or fail, they've certainly reignited a crucial conversation about what kind of future we want to build. Let's hope our leaders are paying attention. In other news, Prince Harry's ongoing battle with News Group newspapers has taken another turn, as the Duke of Sussex has confirmed he will not attend the first day of his trial in London. This announcement comes amidst conflicting reports about his security arrangements, with sources suggesting that Harry has been offered only limited police protection during his stay in the capital. The case itself centers around accusations of unlawful information gathering between 1996 and 2011, including phone hacking, with Harry alleging that The Sun and the now-defunct News of the World violated his privacy. Unsurprisingly, News Group newspapers denies all allegations, and the stage is set for what promises to be a highly contentious trial. Let's take a moment to unpack what's at stake here. On one hand, Harry's legal action against the press is a bold stand for privacy rights, something he and Meghan Markle have consistently championed since stepping back from royal duties. For Harry, this fight is deeply personal. He has often spoken about the traumatic impact of relentless media intrusion, particularly in the wake of his mother Princess Diana's tragic death. This trial isn't just about holding the press accountable. It's about drawing a line in the sand and saying, enough is enough. But on the other hand, Harry's critics argue that his actions are hypocritical. How can someone who regularly courts media attention to promote his projects then turn around and accuse the press of overstepping? It's a question that divides public opinion, and perhaps it's a reflection of the complex relationship we all have with celebrity culture. After all, the public's insatiable appetite for royal gossip is what fuels the tabloids in the first place. So, where do we draw the line between legitimate public interest and outright intrusion? It's a thorny issue, and this case might just force us to confront it. There's also the broader context to consider. This isn't the first time News Group newspapers has faced allegations of phone hacking and other unethical practices. The Leveson inquiry in 2011 uncovered shocking evidence of widespread malpractice across the British press, leading to significant reforms. And yet, here we are more than a decade later, with similar accusations resurfacing. Has the media really learned its lesson, or are we simply seeing history repeat itself? It's hard not to feel a sense of déjà vu, and it raises uncomfortable questions about accountability in an industry that often operates in the shadows. For Harry, the stakes couldn't be higher. Winning this case would not only validate his claims but also send a powerful message to the media that such behavior will no longer be tolerated. However, losing could reinforce the narrative pushed by his detractors that is out of touch, overly litigious, and disconnected from the public's priorities. It's a gamble, no doubt about it, but one that Harry seems willing to take. The real question is whether the British public shares his sense of urgency on this issue or whether they see it as another episode in the ongoing royal soap opera. And let's not ignore the impact this trial could have on the media landscape as a whole. If Harry succeeds, it could set a precedent that makes it far riskier for tabloids to engage in invasive practices. That might sound like a win for privacy, but it also opens up a debate about press freedom. Where do we draw the line between holding public figures accountable and violating their personal lives? The media has a vital role in a democratic society, but it's a role that comes with immense responsibility. Striking the right balance is no easy task, and this trial will undoubtedly add fuel to that conversation. Now, let's turn the question to you. Do you believe Prince Harry is right to pursue this legal action, or do you think it's just another chapter in his strained relationship with the British press? Is this a fight for justice, or is it a distraction from more pressing issues facing the UK? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. These are questions that go beyond one individual. They touch on the very fabric of our society and the role of the media in shaping it. As we reflect on this story, it's worth considering how much has truly changed since the days of the Leveson inquiry. Are we seeing meaningful progress in media ethics, or are the same old tactics still being used, just under a different guise? And, most importantly, what kind of media landscape do we want for future generations? These are big questions, and the answers aren't straightforward. But one thing is certain: cases like this keep the spotlight on the need for accountability, transparency, and a media industry that serves the public good rather than its own interests. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most significant legal battles of the year, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to British Focus. We're here to bring you the stories that matter, spark important conversations, and hold power to account. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.